Hi, my name is Seth Adams. I'm the co-facilitator with Mark Thompson of Thousand Friends of Martinez. Many of the people here are steering committee members, and Mark started the recording a little late, so I'm gonna repeat at the end of this a few things about Thousand Friends and some of the ways you can be involved. But what we're really here to talk about tonight is the Thousand Friends of Martinez Citizens of the Year Award. And we have two incredible people who are receiving the award this year. Bob Doyle on the left, Tina Batt on the right. Tina sent us a photo earlier today receiving the Martinez Chamber of Commerce Citizen of the Year Award in 1993. They have a much lower bar than we do. We go for lifetime achievement. And so it took Tina another, 28 years before she earned the Thousand Friends of Martinez Award. Bob and Tina, obviously, to many people who know them, most of the people in the Zoom room here are a power couple. They've done amazing things for conservation. I consider them very good friends, and we could not be more pleased. If you read the link about this award ceremony, you're going to find what I read here very familiar, but I wrote it, I'm proud of it, and I think it captures them well. Tina Batt, founder of the Martinez Regional Land Trust. Robert Doyle, General Manager, retired, East Bay Regional Park District. Tina Batt began her conservation career as a founder and volunteer board member of the Martinez Regional Land Trust, now the John Muir Land Trust. She became the full-time executive director and expanded the geographical scope of what became the Muir Heritage Land Trust. During her tenure, a variety of properties were protected in Martinez, where she was a longtime resident. She transitioned from the land trust to a second career in organizational and fund development consulting with a number of organizations, including the University of California's Natural Reserve System, and as the land program officer at the S.D. Bechtel Jr. Foundation. Tina is currently the board president of the Redwood Coast Land Conservancy up north of Sea Ranch. Her legacy includes a dramatic expansion of land trust conservation around Martinez. Bob Doyle, meanwhile, grew up in Concord. 50 years ago in 1971, he was a founding board member of Save Mount Diablo. He served for 25 years, including 11 as president, in a rapid period of expansion of Mount Diablo State Park and nearby regional parks. In his 20s, he began 47 years at the East Bay Regional Park District as a ranger, working in the land department and on the trail system as assistant general manager for land acquisition and advanced planning for 25 years, and then as general manager for the past 10 years until his retirement in December. As assistant general manager and general manager, he was responsible for doubling the acreage of the regional park district to over 125,000 acres, creation of dozens of new parks, and expansion of most of the others, over 200 miles of new regional and other trails, and implementation of over $1 billion in capital projects. In Martinez, Bob helped expand Briones and the Contra Costa Canal Trail, restore Radke Martinez waterfront, and to create Carquinez, Waterbird, and Crockett Hills regional parks, and the Iron Horse, SF Bay Trail, and Bay Area Ridge Trails. In 50 years, Bob Doyle has probably had a greater impact on East Bay conservation than anyone. Bob and Tina have 4 sons, and they split their time between Walnut Creek and Sea Ranch. Now, Bob and Tina just got back from Maine, and we haven't had a chance to present the award, which is a photo, to them in person, but we're going to show it to you now. And then we're going to have presentations from each of them, which I'll mention in just a moment. Mark, you want to show the photo of the Dutra Ranch, which Tina and Bob were instrumental in protecting. This is a Tina Batt project. We're gonna share screen in a moment. And if not, I can share mine, Mark.
It just takes a little while.
There we go.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness.
So this is a Scott Hine photo. Scott generously donates the photos for our award ceremonies each year. Kay Cox was sorry she could not be here, but she had the photo framed and the plaque made, and next is the plaque at the bottom of the photo.
Thank you so much.
Oh, how nice.
That's beautiful.
It is very grassroots. So we're going to have a 15-minute presentation from each of them. Tina is gonna speak on the topic of starting Martinez Land Trust, a model for community-based land conservation, by Tina Batt, founder of the Martinez Regional Land Trust. And after she concludes her remarks, I'll introduce Bob. Tina, take it away.
And thank you so much for the award, all of you, and that lovely photograph. The Dutra Ranch, one of my favorite projects, mainly because of the family. They were just helpful every step of the way. It was one of those rare gems of land conservation where there weren't a lot of problems. So let me start by saying, I'll give the history of the Martinez Regional Land Trust, which evolved into Muir Heritage. But I want to recognize the people that were involved. There's so many people that deserve recognition. Sherida Bush has written the history, so if you want the details, ask her. She wrote a beautiful history that mentions many of these people that I will mention, and I think it's important that the history be included because current and future students of conservation need to know the individuals involved as well as the details of the conservation efforts. If you look at Save Mount Diablo's website, they mention people. If you look at Save the Redwoods League, they mention people. And I think those stories are really critical to learn about conservation and its importance and difficulty at that period of time. In the early 80s, or I should say towards the late 80s, this was a totally volunteer effort. I started in 1987. I was asked to join the Alhambra Valley Specific Plan Committee. In Alhambra Valley, I was living in a park residence in Briones Regional Park and was very concerned about the proposed Stonehurst development. At the same time, before I started my work, Friends of Franklin Hills were charging ahead, trying to protect the downtown hills of Martinez, and they really had the hardest work. They were the activists. They were up against the development that was proposed for those hills. Sherida was involved, Tim Platt, of course, Scott Williams, Gene Will, our beloved Gene Will, and Barbara Woodburn, many other people. And if I leave anybody out, please let me know, but I want to mention some of these names. So while I was on the planning committee, the specific plan committee in Alhambra Valley with Marianne Gaby, Earl Donovan, Hal and Maria Olson, of course. Frank Pereira was also on that committee. We knew what was going on downtown, and what was proposed at Stonehurst was a set aside of land to be preserved. And we felt very strongly, a few of us on that committee felt very strongly, the only way to preserve it was to execute a conservation easement, put the conservation easement on the open space and preserve it in perpetuity. The developer of the Stonehurst property, Jim Busby, agreed that if we could form a land trust, by the time he was ready to offer to dedicate the open space, then he would agree to accept the conservation easement on the 150 acres of open space that were created. Peter Langley helped not only with the incorporation of the land trust, he helped draft the conservation easement, all pro bono, through his law firm. So at the same time this was going on, and we were starting to talk. Friends of Franklin Hills, the Alhambra Valley Specific Plan Committee, as we were forming the land trust, we were realizing the land trust needed to be more than a few people in Alhambra Valley. We needed the work that was being done to support our efforts, the work that was going on downtown. So this was very much a grassroots effort. And one of the things that I found most intriguing, and I still find it intriguing about the work of Friends of Franklin Hills, is you can be anywhere downtown Martinez and you see those hills preserved. The backdrop is there. It's preserved for everyone who lives in Martinez. And that was the purpose. Everyone should have access. Everyone should see the beautiful landscapes. So that was part of our incentive. At the same time, before we finished Stonehurst, the Mount Wanda property came up. The property owner, Gordon Strain, was determined to preserve his ranch. He had been approached by a number of developers. Frank Pereira was his real estate agent, and Gordon Strain, in his failing health, continued to call me and said, "Can't we do something? Can't we do something?" Well, they managed to get Congressman George Miller to introduce legislation that funded the acquisition. So at that point, before we were formed as a land trust, we went to a city council meeting and we needed additional funds. Congressman Miller came up with the acquisition of the property, funding for the acquisition of the property, which was approximately $3 million. And thank goodness for that. And he faced a lot of opposition from people in Martinez. And from the city council, as it turned out, because when we asked the city council to contribute their share of the Measure AA funds that East Bay Regional Park District had just finished their campaign, $75,000 in order to complete the acquisition, because Gordon wanted a life estate. We needed another $150,000. The park district would match that. We went to the city council. Jack Telfer was in the audience, Ted Radke, of course. Kathy Radke was on the city council. Mr. Doyle was there, and we made our case to the city council. It was a small amount to finish a very important acquisition, as you all know, because I'm sure you've enjoyed Mount Wanda. We were told by the city council that this was not something they would support, and they did not say it politely. In fact, they insulted many of the city leaders, including Frank Pereira and Jack Telfer. At the end of the meeting, what was his name? I can't remember the gentleman's name. He came running up to me and said, "I'll give you $1,000. You raise the money." And so we rushed our incorporation. We raised the $75,000, which seemed like a lot of money at that point. And the acquisition was concluded, in spite of the fact that until the very last minute, Gordon Strain was being approached by developers. Keep in mind that Mount Wanda had city water and city sewer. So if Mount Wanda was developed, it opened up the whole Franklin Ridge. That's why it was so important. So we prevailed and we raised the funds, we were incorporated, and very quickly our next project came along, the Stonehurst conservation easements. So that was around 1992, and by 1993, actually it was a Lifetime Achievement Award that I received from the Martinez Chamber of Commerce. I received that award, but there were so many people involved. I was very grateful for the recognition, but it was a turning point for the city, especially the Chamber of Commerce. They decided they wanted to get behind conservation in 1993. It took them a while, but they came along. The Land Trust Board at that point had a lot of people working very hard, and I'm going through this now with a very small land trust up north. Everybody was working in unpaid positions, and that included Nancy Schaefer, who did have a land trust background, Kay Cox, who was a board chair, Steve Pardiak, many other board members. It was a lot of work because we had no staff. Our partnership with East Bay Regional Park District was established at that point. We could never have done it without them. And they were very, very, very supportive of our formation. And I attribute that primarily to Bob and the board of the park district. Ted Radke, of course, was a big part of that. We did hire our first staff person. Well, she wasn't our first. We tried with a couple of people, but Mary Alice Statham came along, and she was in one of those pictures I gave you, Mark. And she made all the difference in the world. She was an organizational genius. And without her, I don't think we could have overcome those initial growing pains of trying to raise money, trying to get the organization going, building capacity. She had all those skills. And then finally, in terms of the fundraising, the donors and supporters encouraged us every step of the way. We were in direct contact with them through various mechanisms. Oh, you're going to share the screen. Okay. There it is. This was, I think it was one of the early celebrations. So it was right in that time period. And I wanted to include this photograph, not to see how young we were, but also there's Mary Alice. And I asked her to join us today, but she's in Italy, Italian. So I'm very pleased for her. This was one of our first fresh air affairs. And I think Kay Cox was in charge of it at that point, probably celebrating the Mount Wanda acquisition.
And boy, was she cute.
So in terms of our early donors and supporters, I remember the first $50,000 donation we received, and it was from Paul Craig's parents. Paul Craig, of course, was a great supporter, but his parents gave us funding, and they lived in Pennsylvania. And because I grew up in Pennsylvania, I had the opportunity to go visit them and thank them. And it meant so much to me. And I think it meant a lot to them as well. And Paul and Kay obviously continued to support the Land Trust and our growth through these many, many years. I also want to recognize Martha Joseph and Gary Bogue, who helped us with not only our fundraising, but our growth in terms of people, the number of members we had. I think with Gary and Martha's campaign, and they would do this together. Gary worked for the Contra Costa Times, Martha worked for the Martinez Gazette. So they would compete in their fundraising efforts. And our membership jumped to over 2,000 people because Gary had such a following, and we'd get the crumpled dollar bills in the envelopes. And that was as important as the big donations, just to have those individuals involved. So that's what kept us going. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of perseverance. And I think the story, again, as Sherida wrote, is important so people don't take it for granted and think that every project is a formula. It's not. It's difficult. Our average acquisition project took at least 10 years. And that's the nature of land trust work. And I'm so grateful to be part of this community. I still consider myself part of the Martinez community. My kids and grandkids live in my house now. They've inherited the legacy. They're working hard, and will always be part of this community because of how wonderful it is and how important conservation is to everyone, I think, at this point, because you can see the results and you can benefit from the open space that we've worked so hard to preserve. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to my co-presenter.
Thank you, Tina. And Bob Doyle, General Manager, retired from East Bay Regional Park District, has the very complicated topic of 50 years of East Bay conservation. Take it away, Bob.
Thank you, Seth. And notice how Tina really kept to the timing. I will do my best. I told her she had to go first, or else, I'd hog the time. This is a really special offer and special honor for a lot of reasons. I actually consider Martinez the hotbed of environmental activism. And Tina talked about all of the people who helped with the land trust, but it's on a much bigger scale. There was leadership, obviously, with the gentleman who lived down the street, went to Yosemite all the time, but great leaders, including George Miller, who was so important to these projects and so many other projects from local to regional to national. Hewlett Hornbeck, my mentor, my wizard, and then very especially Ted and Kathy Radke. And I think I'll talk probably more about Ted and Kathy Radke than anyone, because I'm so honored that the board of directors, including Colin here on Director Coffee on this call, really supported renaming Martinez Regional Shoreline after the Radkes. And I think that's a very, very well-deserved honor in so many ways. But, you know, they really were part of a generation just a little bit ahead of our time, who really started getting involved with water, the Delta, open space, and active politics. And both Ted and Kathy served on many committees, but including the Martinez City Council, and then Ted later with his leadership in the East Bay Regional Park District. It's just such an amazing thing that these people came from Martinez. I can't claim that I lived in Martinez, although evidently I spent many nights there, and we'll move on. But also that I worked at the Martinez Marina. I worked for the city of Martinez, and I used to watch as people dumped into the shoreline and wondered what's going to happen. The marina was the focus, always struggling, but around it was proposal after proposal, including the filling of wetlands to really develop that shoreline. And again, I have to say something that is the most endangered species that I've seen, which is a very conservation-minded Republican, which is Senator John Nedgedly. And without Senator Nedgedly, there would not be a Martinez shoreline. He sponsored the legislation to transfer the state ownerships on the land on the shoreline to the East Bay Regional Park District. He was a huge advocate of open space. That's why we have the John Nedgedly staging area. Really, year after year, sponsored legislation in Sacramento as a champion for all parks, but particularly his county. And so much money came, and so much legislation, including environmental legislation, the Forest Practices Act, many of the environmental regulations, and a lot of those were all through Senator Nedgedly. And so, you know, I really wish we had that kind of conservative conservationist in that side of the aisle. And it really is a rarity. But you need to remember that somebody like John Nedgedly with an R behind his name really was a huge conservationist, and would be probably considered a very liberal or radical even Republican at this time. So I just think those names are so important. But I think Tina really talked about every one of these battles around Martinez was a fight and was proposed for development. The Martinez Ridge, the Friends of Franklin Hills, that was proposed on 10 properties along that ridge for 250 houses, and it was real. People would say that oh, it's just open space, you bought it from a rancher. But that was being proposed for development. And the devil in the details was that Hewlett Hornbeck and even George Card, that wonderful tunnel and rare tunnel under Highway 4 was your connection for the state hiking and riding trail. Had it not been specifically for George Cardinay and his one-person campaign, the equestrian, the long famous trail person, there would be no into the John Muir and the trail on the ridge. One person did that, and I really want to emphasize it. There wasn't a band, there wasn't a group. It was George Cardinay saying that you cannot build the freeway and bisect the old state hiking and riding trail. Then Senator Boatwright, who took over after John Nedgedly retired, went from Assembly to the Senate, sponsored legislation for the district to for the state hiking and riding trail. And Hornbeck took this kid, Doyle, and said, I want you to reknit together the state hiking and riding trail. It's there, but it's not used. There's opposition, there's fences across it. And so my job at that time, one of many in the district, but that was one of the trails, was to reopen the state hiking and riding trail. And there was tremendous opposition from the landowners. But what I realized is that we could actually go beyond that, because there was so much opposition to development up there, and start to buy pieces at a time to expand the trail. There was not a proposal for a Carquinez Park. There wasn't a proposal for a Crockett Hills Park. It was just Martinez Shoreline, the trail. I think incredible story of citizen activism to basically shut down the developments of that beautiful ridgeline and give me the chance, working for the Park District, to start buying those pieces. And it was all of Chardonnay's effort too, of just preserving that trail since the 1940s, trying to preserve that trail. And today, it is still not finished, is not connected. It was supposed to go all the way over the Dutra property. That's the other part of the feeder trail. The Park District is on it, but it's never been finished and needs to get done, because that was a Ted Radke, Hewlett Hornbeck, and really a big effort there to redo that. There's still opposition from property owners to reopen parts of that. But I think this is the struggle. When Tina talked about the national park expansion, National Parks was opposed to the Strain and Low acquisition. And they were opposed to it just because they didn't know how to take care of it. The person who was the superintendent at the time says it's about the house, it's about John Muir's history. Why are we buying this property on the other side of the freeway? And today that parking lot is overflowing every single day with people using that property. So I just think I was part of a generation, and Tina was too, of once upon a time being very young, Scott, and being mentored by activists at that time. We need a new youth army of activists to deal with things like this on a greater scale for climate change. Every acre preserved helps us with climate change. Every acre we buy that we allow new people into it builds a stronger base for that preservation. So finally, just a minute on Briones. Briones is one of the largest regional parks in the system. Yeah. If you think about that, it's surrounded by 5 cities. It's an island that now has been connected in both directions to other parks. And what has happened now is there is a system of that 105,000 acres and watersheds and city parks that have created an amazing urban wilderness. Nothing like this in the United States, of a locally owned regional wilderness. And it's just something that we need to get people excited about and get young people involved. So many times in this story, people were told no, can't do it, no money, too expensive. And I think that's true with Alhambra Hills. I think that's true with lots and lots of things. Now, time to not back, it's the time to pull forward and even a bigger vision, because frankly, there's more money now than there has been even in the highest days. Back then, when we were doing this work in the beginning, there wasn't, but thanks to legislative people and support, thanks to the community activism, it's always been a marathon, not a sprint. And I think a lot of young people get discouraged because how come it didn't happen yet, or it's not going to happen, or somebody said no. Just don't take no for an answer. Keep going. Many people said no to the Park District. Many people said no to expanding Mount Diablo or open space around the cities. So I just say, you got to get the money, you got to build the support, you got to open parks to people, and you have to take on these incredible projects, but in partnership with the community. The community activism is key. It can't just be somebody rides in on a horse like Chardonnay, but with a bucket of money and says, I'm going to make this park. It's got to have the support of the local citizens. And it is controversial many times. I can name almost every city that at one point or another didn't care if there was more open space. It was all about economic development. Think about Martinez Shoreline being filled. One of the great projects that the Park District did is to dig up that fill on the side and create a massive, beautiful new marsh with the bridges and pull out all that stuff that was dumped in there. $4 million mitigation project to do that. It's one of the projects I'm proud of in the Park District. So I just say you got to get young people involved. We need more jobs for people to work in the environment like we ended up doing. So lucky to get a good job, but does do part of making the earth better and creating better places to live for future generations. Look at the density of housing that's being built all over, but they're not adding new land. We're using more the old land. Our national parks are overflowing and overcrowded. So we need more groups like this to support preserving open and opening them up. So we're addressing the impacts of climate change, of flooding, and biodiversity. And I just think this is such a great example of a tough row to hoe, and what an accomplishment in partnership with so many people. So thank you.
Silent climate.
So Bob and Tina, thank you both. You both actually came in under time. So I thought we would, I see James there and your grandkids. I thought we'd go for a couple of questions here. If someone wants to make a comment from the old days like Scott, or ask you a question. I'm not seeing how to raise your hand on here. I think you just click on the screen, but raise your hand and we'll turn on your mic, or turn on your mic yourself. Mark, you ready? Anybody? This group is not a group that doesn't have questions.
Hey, right over
Go ahead,
here.
Tim.
So all I've got to say is a little bit about how things changed, but I don't think I saw as directed and as internally strategically oriented a person in my experience outside of Tina. She had the plan in her head and she put the pieces together to help take this land trust from an idea and put it into an organization that could do things. And I have nothing but respect for that. And I'm going to tell one little story on you. It's not a Jim Cutler. He ran the planning department for the county. And Tina and I went over there, and Tina was trying to get maps and whatnot. And I'll remember that he took out this map and he had about 20 overlays on it. And we were looking there, and Tina and I didn't know what I was looking at. Tina did. She was looking at gold, and we wanted that so badly. Nowadays, it's an example in a museum, but we finally got it when they went to computer, as I recall. And I remember that trip over there with you and Jim Cutler and the enthusiasm and just watching you go to work. You're wonderful to deal with.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, forgot to mention Jim. He was critical. The county support was critical. He turned the Board of Supervisors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Briones Hills Agricultural Preserve, which was unique for that time as well.
Yeah, you can list the things, and every time you list something, you come up with two more when you start pulling these things apart. They're all connected, as we know, through John Muir. Any other questions or comments? If not, we're gonna say, Bob?
Howdy.
Hi.
I'm sorry.
I got my hand up, Seth.
Scott.
I just wanted to talk about the night that it all began for me, which was actually the night that the fight for the Franklin Hills began. Barb Woodburn and Sharon Hicks had put up.
Oh, Sharon, thank you.
Yeah, Sharon was, the two of them had put up little signs on telephone poles saying, there's a proposal to change the zoning on all of the lands of the Franklin Hills. Come to the Planning Commission meeting. We need to stop this, basically. And I mean, I met them basically at that very first Planning Commission meeting. And we didn't know what in hell we were doing, what was going to be happening. I just met them, I don't know, a day before, I think. And literally 5 minutes before the meeting, I called you, Bob, because I had your personal number and got through to you. And I said, is there any plans for the East Bay Regional Parks to be involved in the hills here? And you said at the time you were doing the Hewlett's old job at that point. And you said, well, no, not at this point. But let me tell you one thing. If there is ever a public hue and cry for the regional parks to become involved in a land issue, we will. And with that knowledge, we then, every single meeting said, this should be parkland. Every single meeting. And just, so we created that public hue and cry. But if I hadn't known that, we wouldn't have known what to do. But that was the beginning, that one little missive you gave me. It was so crucial. Thanks.
And Scott, just to say, it was really Ted Radke who led the charge at the district. And there's a quick joke. So there was one point that Ted came to me and said, the land trust needs more money for this project. And I said, I don't know. I don't think we can do that. And he told me, it's Tina Batt. You better do that. And that was before we were ever dating. And so Ted, in no uncertain terms, told the general manager at the time to tell me, we're going to give the land trust some money. And I just want to clear the record. It had nothing to do with each other. I know.
Well, I want to say that, Seth, just
Yes,
a quickie. I'm sorry, did I step on someone's toes? I apologize. But
Not at all.
Hewlett Hornbeck was so involved with Martinez, and he is one of the founding members of the Alhambra Hills Open Space Committee. He was one of the founding 10 of us that put that together and started moving along. And we have permission from his family to name the trail going through the Alhambra Hills when it becomes public land, the Hewlett Hornbeck Trail. So something to look forward to.
Well, we knew this would be a love fest here with Bob and Tina coming home to talk to everyone. Thank you all for the comments and the questions. Tina and Bob, thank you for your presentations and really for a lifetime of work from both of you. Tina's continuing this work on the Redwood Coast now, north of Sea Ranch and up through the Mendocino area. And conservationists don't stop. They just go on to preserve other places. We do need more people to get involved with the effort. We always do. There's always a generational shift that needs to be replenished. We get tired and we need new energy to come in and reinvigorate things. I'm talking to you, James. Everybody take note of what they've accomplished in their lives and how important it's been to you and yours. And we're going to move on. I'm going to turn this back over to Mark Thompson to go to our last brief presentations about some important issues. And then I'll wrap things up at the end.
Thank you all. Thanks, everybody. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is great. You guys built more than one trail, I bet, too.